A theological position that has risen to prominence in recent years is that of Molinism, getting its name from the 16th century Jesuit theologian Louis de Molina, but brought to prominence in our time by the American debater William Lane Craig. The position attempts to reconcile God's sovereignty with human free will. Anyone who has been watching this video series, or has read much of my work, will know that this is a subject that I believe is at the heart of Christian theology and theology in general. In this video, I will explain the central tenets of Molinism, and will suggest that while it may be a philosophically interesting theory, when we relate it to the real world, it actually makes no sense at all. Molina's theory is a complex one, but I will give a brief explanation. Molina posits that God has three different types of knowledge: natural knowledge, free knowledge, and middle knowledge. Natural knowledge is God's knowledge of all logical possibilities, that is to say, everything that is necessarily true. An example of one such truth is all bachelors are unmarried. God's free knowledge refers to everything that God has actualized, that is, the knowledge of everything he has freely created. And finally, between these two types of knowledge is middle knowledge, which includes everything that would happen in a certain set of circumstances. At the outset, I should say that I find these definitions of God's knowledge to be problematic, as they seem to turn God into a kind of logic machine where he is limited by the laws of logic, as if they exist in some kind of Platonic ideal realm. This is not the way I believe God to be at all. I believe God is much simpler than the Molinist position implies. Nevertheless, let us consider the theory. For our purposes, we will focus on middle knowledge, which is the aspect of Molina's theological perspective which has been considered to hold the solution to the divine sovereignty versus human free will predicament. In a video entitled "What is Molinism?", Craig explains the position. What Molina said is that logically prior to God's creating the world, God knew what any free creature that he might create would freely do in any set of circumstances in which he might place that person. This is so-called middle knowledge, which Craig explains elsewhere as follows. Middle knowledge is God's knowledge of what people would do freely in any set of circumstances, and those people may never exist. So, as I understand the position, Molina believes that prior to creation there are an infinite number of possible worlds, all of which God knows everything about. Within those worlds, God knows every choice that any free person would make in any set of circumstances, and this is true before he has even decided to create that person. God picks one of these possible worlds to be the actual world, and thereby puts each person in a set of circumstances that he is perfectly in control of, and he knows exactly what they will do, yet they are still free to do whatever they choose. To even conceptualize this is a real struggle, but as I mentioned earlier, it's a complicated theory. I am confident, however, that I am able to grasp enough of the theory to see why it fails. So I will now offer three refutations in response to the theory, all of which are interrelated. Number one is that it is impossible for anyone to do anything freely. God, by his very nature, is omnipresent, which means there are no boundaries to God's being. If God has no boundaries, it logically follows that every atom in the universe is a part of God and therefore under God's control. In this context, free will is impossible. My second refutation is that in reality there is no separateness between God and man. Molinism says that we have man on the one hand who is free, and man's circumstances on the other hand that are determined by God. But in reality, it is impossible to draw a distinction between man and his circumstances because there is no dividing line where one ends and the other begins. For instance, is your breathing caused by you or your circumstances? How about your choice of clothes or food? If you consider the answers to these questions, it should be obvious that you cannot separate man and his circumstances into two separate categories. Really, all that exists is a single present moment unfolding, which is not ontologically distinct from God. Entities within this unfolding are merely aspects or appearances of God, and crucially, this includes human beings. My third refutation is that creation is an ongoing process. Craig's view of the universe is that it was created at a specific point in time long ago, in a Big Bang event. But if this is the case, what is God doing right now? The separation between God and creation is a fiction. Creation did not happen at some point in the past. On the contrary, God is unfolding all events right now, in the present moment. The past and the future, which are necessary components of Craig's take on Molinism, don't exist in reality. They're just ideas in the minds of creatures. So let's summarise. If we deeply consider the nature of God, it is easy to see why Molinism fails to reconcile the divine sovereignty versus human free will predicament. The solution to that predicament is the realisation that all that exists within God and is therefore under God's control. There is no free will, and once we realise this, the need to posit God's middle knowledge, as Molina and Craig have done, evaporates. What are your views on Molinism and the refutations I have given in this video? Feel free to leave a comment below with your thoughts. In the next video, we'll be taking a look at the question of whether Jesus Christ played a role in the creation of the world, which is a popular idea among Christians. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. This video series accompanies my new book titled God's Grand Game, which is available now from all major retailers. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of future videos.